It was a dark and stormy night. The city of London, always alive with energy, was eerily silent. The shadows of war loomed heavily in the air, and no one knew what the future held. Winston Churchill, the man who would soon lead Britain through its darkest hours, sat alone in his study. His eyes were fixed on a map of Europe, his mind racing with strategies. But little did the world know, Churchill was about to face his greatest challenge yet, one that would test his courage, resolve, and leadership. It all began in the early months of 1940. Britain was at war with Nazi Germany, and the situation was growing increasingly dire. The British forces were retreating in France, and the German army was advancing rapidly. The people of Britain, frightened and uncertain, were beginning to lose hope. But Churchill, who had just become Prime Minister, was not one to back down. He knew that if Britain was to survive, they needed strong leadership, and it was up to him to provide it. Churchill's first challenge came with the Dunkirk evacuation. The British Army, trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk, needed a miracle to escape the Nazi forces closing in. While many were ready to abandon the soldiers, Churchill refused to give up. He called for a massive civilian effort, urging every available ship to sail across the English Channel to rescue the stranded men. It was a bold move, and it paid off. Against all odds, over 330,000 British soldiers were saved, a moment that would be etched in history. As Britain celebrated the success of Dunkirk, the war was far from over. The Battle of Britain loomed on the horizon. Churchill knew that if the Nazis could gain control of the skies, they would have a clear path to invade Britain. The Royal Air Force, RAF, was outnumbered, and morale was low. But Churchill rallied the nation with his famous speeches, inspiring the RAF pilots and the civilians. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few, he declared. The skies above Britain were filled with enemy planes, yet the courage of the RAF pilots did not falter. Night after night, they fought off wave after wave of German bombers. Despite the immense pressure, Churchill never showed doubt. He kept a strong, steady face, a leader who was determined to stand firm. The people of Britain, seeing his resolve, found their own courage. It wasn't just a battle for land, it was a battle for survival, and the spirit of the nation began to rise. As the war dragged on, Churchill's leadership was put to the test in countless ways. The German bombing campaign, known as the Blitz, relentlessly targeted British cities, causing widespread destruction. London was a nightly inferno, yet Churchill remained unshaken. He visited bombed areas, stood amidst the rubble, and assured the people that victory was within reach. His presence was a constant reminder that Britain would never surrender, no matter the cost. With every victory, however, the war seemed to intensify. In 1941, Churchill received the news that the Germans had invaded the Soviet Union. The Nazi forces were now engaged on two fronts, and the tide was beginning to turn. But there was still one major obstacle: the United States. America had not yet entered the war, and Churchill knew that without American support, Britain would not last much longer. He had to convince President Franklin D. Roosevelt to join the fight. Churchill's persuasive powers were unmatched. He understood the importance of timing and rhetoric. He worked tirelessly to convince Roosevelt that the defeat of Nazi Germany was a shared goal, and that the only way to achieve it was through collaboration. Slowly but surely, Roosevelt began to understand the urgency of the situation. The United States, once neutral, was now drawn into the war, and with it, a new hope for victory. With American support, the tide of war began to shift. Allied forces landed in North Africa, then Italy, and eventually launched a full-scale invasion of Normandy on D-Day. The Germans were on the retreat, but Churchill knew the war was far from over. The last phase of the war would be the most challenging, as it would require both military and political strategy to defeat Hitler once and for all. Churchill's leadership would be crucial to the final victory. When Germany finally surrendered in 1945, Winston Churchill's leadership was credited with turning the tide of history. The bravery, determination, and wisdom of this singular man had saved Britain from the brink of defeat. He had faced impossible odds, and yet against all expectations, he had led his nation to victory. Churchill's legacy lived on as a beacon of strength and resilience, a reminder that true leadership rises in the face of adversity